All right, everybody, welcome to our budget listening session. I'm going to call our meeting to order. If you've been to one of these before, you know we typically do that since we do have all of our commissioners together, and this is a deliberative sort of event. So I'm officially calling our meeting to order. I'm Mayor Will Lewis, if you don't know. And I'm going to introduce all of our commissioners. I'm going to start with our Mayor Pro Tem, Brenda, who is not here with us today because she had a personal matter that was pre-scheduled a few months ago, so she will not be with us this evening. Then we've got Danny Walsh right here in the front row. We've got Commissioner Tyrone Canty, Commissioner Mark Larkin, and Cynthia just texted me. She's coming straight from work and will be rolling in any moment. She just texted me that she's driving here from work, so she'll be here shortly. If you've been to a listening session before, this next part will be a little boring for you, but I'll tell you just basically what we're going to do. We're going to run through some slides for you and fill you in on kind of what's happening with budget now. We'll start with some basic stuff about the city just to give you a little bit of perspective. And then we'll run through what the proposal is right now by the board. And the board's had a couple of meetings and have put together a proposal for everyone to review today. We fully anticipate at least one more workshop on the budget. The public hearing will be June 2nd. And we've got all that up there. We'll go through that in a second, but I just want to say it multiple times. Our public hearing is June 2nd. The reason we started doing this listening session was a few years ago when we had the reevaluation. It was a very complex change. We did a listening session on the budget that was very well attended, and we got a lot of good feedback, and we had a lot of good dialogue. We're required by law to do the public hearing, and we're going to do that. But a lot of you have been to public hearings, and you know there's not a lot of opportunity for back and forth dialogue. You get the opportunity to say what you want to say. We do try to converse a little bit if we can answer questions, but it's not the same as this. This is a much more informal opportunity for us to present to you where the board is sitting right now, kind of what they're looking at, and then get any feedback from you. If you have questions for clarification, we're going to open that up as soon as we get through the slides. And I will ask that if you come up to the mic to ask your questions, because we are live streaming on Facebook, and matter of fact, Brenda was asking earlier if we were going to make sure we got a live stream up so that she could be watching it since she can't be here with us. And I know we have a lot of citizens that were asking today. We are live streaming from the back on Facebook, and our mics are hooked into the system, the magic system that gets it somehow on Greta's phone and into Facebook. So if you say something from your seat, the people at home are not going to hear it. The reason I bring that up is we've dealt with that in the past, where people at home are like, we couldn't hear what people were saying because they started speaking from their seat. So I'll ask that you please just come up to the microphone so that people at home can hear your question. And everyone here will be able to hear it a little bit better too, since we're in a little bit larger room. Let me run through our staff that are here real quick, our department heads. So if you don't know who they are, you'll know. This is our city manager right here. Sitting next to him in the black dress here is Cindy Morgan. She's your assistant city manager. Melanie, who is she's our deputy clerk, handling our clerk duties tonight. Greta down here is the one who's handling the live stream from the back and does all of our PIO type stuff. Anytime you see anything on Facebook, Instagram, or flyers, and she has to do that for the whole city and the committees. Also in the front row is Kimberly. She is your finance director. Behind her, we've got Kelvin. He's your rec director. Katrina is your planning and inspections director. Angie is HR. Pam runs this building, our four-time award-winning building. Patrick is your public works director. Rick is your public utilities director. Chief Dorn right here is your police chief. Sitting next to him is your assistant fire chief. Deputy Chief Mike Dixon right there. All three of us Havelock High School graduates, just throwing that out there. And then in the very back there, you've got Chad, who's holding the iPad right there. He's in charge of all of our IT in the city, and his partner in crime, Todd Jack, and then standing next to him in the uniform is Chief Broadwell. So that covered all your department heads. There are some other employees here, but they're also citizens, so I'm going to assume they're here as citizens as much as they are as employees. So let's get started. We just went through who your board is. This is a structure we try to remind everybody before we do any listening session. Citizens of Havelock elect a mayor and commissioners. The mayor and commissioners hire and fire only one person, and that's your city manager. And then your city manager has the responsibility of executing on the budget and handling all personnel within the city, which you'll see in a second is a little over 130 employees. So it goes citizens of Havelock, mayor and commissioners. We hire a city manager. City manager is in charge of the departments and staff. A lot of y'all have seen this a lot, and it's on our website if you haven't seen it already. We've got our mission and core values, and just a couple things I'll mention that these listening sessions are a part of: the open communication and accountability. We do try to make sure that you guys are getting the information you need in ways that make it easier for you. Some of you are on Facebook, we know that. Some of you are on our website, but this is one more opportunity for you to come and even get a little interactive information from us. Okay, let's talk about 24-25. This is what the city of Havelock looks like. Number of employees, you have 134 employees in the city of Havelock. Number of street miles, you got 47.4. 6.3 square miles. We have 12 parks. That includes the rec center that a lot of y'all been to, the 50-acre complex out there at the rec, but then also individual neighborhood parks and even City Park and Walter B. Jones. So 12 parks. We have 5,954 utility customers. That is the number of people in the city that have a water or wastewater bill. And I say or because there are people in town like even Danny Walsh who have county water but have a city sewer bill. So we have 5,954 utility customers. We have 80 miles of sewer main. That is correct. We have more sewer main miles by almost twice than we do street miles. The only difference is you can't see them. They're all buried underground. Our population, 17,479. And just to hit on that for 1 second, we've been as high as just over 20,000. And then a lot of you probably know we've had, we're transitioning to F-35, so we've had some squadrons that have left. And our base is kind of being rebuilt, and that population, we're coming out of the bathtub now, as we call it, so we expect that population to be back closer to 20,000 in about 2 or 3 years when the full F-35 transition happens. But this is our population according to state OMB, so that drives things like grants and funding and even math for calculations on funding we get from the state. That population drives that. The average home value in Havelock is $186,300. We had a revaluation 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 3. So we put average home value up here because we're going to use it again later. A lot of cities and counties don't do that. We ask for that information directly from the county, and we use that to help make the budget make sense from an average perspective. I know some of you are sitting here saying, my house is worth more than $186,000, and some of you are saying, my house is worth less than $186,000. This is the average. And so we use the average because it can give a little bit of perspective on what it means when you raise a tax 1 penny, right? So if tax goes up or down 1 cent, we can say, oh, for the average home, that's roughly this. If your house is worth $190, obviously you might be paying 20 cents more than that, or $1 more than that. And if your house is worth less, maybe it's less. So we put that in there to try to make things more concrete versus just simply abstract. And by the way, there's Cynthia. Cynthia, I did tell him you were en route from work. Cynthia arrived, so if you don't know your other commissioner, that's Cynthia right there. Okay, for the year we are in right now, which is 24-25, our fiscal year runs July 1 to June 30th every year. So we're still in the 24-25 fiscal year. Your general tax rate, 71 cents per 100. Our ad valorem tax base, which means the value of everything in the city of Havelock that can be taxed, is $992 million. 1 penny represents $98,500. So that is a reference to let you know that if the board changes a penny on the tax rate, whether they go up or down, it changes our operating dollar amount by $98,000. So if the board increases taxes by a penny, the city gets an extra $98,000. If the city decreases taxes by a penny, we lose $98,560 out of our revenue. So that's what a penny equates to across that entire $990 million asset level. That's what 1 penny does. Our general fund this year is about $15.8 million. General fund being basically your tax-driven items and all of your things in that, like police and fire and public works and administration and IT. That's your general fund. Water fund, $3.3 million. Your wastewater fund, your sewer is $5.7 million. Solid waste fund is $1.3. That's all of the trash pickup. So that includes your brown, white, and green pickup off the side of the road, but it also includes the trash contract with GFL for your blue can that gets picked up once a week. That's all inclusive in that $1.3 million. Our stormwater fund's $525,000. You remember that's a relatively new fund, and we're going to break that down in a little bit. But that's a relatively new fund to do stormwater only. Our Tourist and Event Center, the total budget for that's about $600,000. E911 is $168,000. That is a very, I'll use the word regulated, a very specific account that is provided to us by the state of North Carolina. When you look at your phone bills, and you would see that little number at the bottom, $1 or $2. That the state collects, that revenue goes into a calculated amount. Again, population does matter in calculations, but they send us a portion of that every year. We can only use it for very, very specific things. Telecommunications efforts, maybe electronics within our E911 system. So it's a very restricted fund. That's why it's out separate. Can only be used for very certain things that meet the law. If you're also wondering why all this is broken out separate and we don't just say we have a $27.5 million budget, just a reminder for anyone who hasn't been here before, the general fund is our tax dollar fund. The water, sewer, solid waste, stormwater, and tourist and event center are all called enterprise funds. So that means in our budget, they are supposed to operate as a business. So we do not mix money from the general fund and the water fund. When you pay your water and you pay your sewer and you pay your solid waste on your utility bill, all of that money goes directly into those accounts. So they're separated because what we charge at the meter for your water should be what it takes to run the water department. And it's supposed to run as an enterprise fund, which is the government way of saying it's a business. Our job is not to make a profit, but we're not supposed to be losing money with our water rates and our wastewater rates and those sorts of things. That's why they're broken out separate, because they are a different type of fund. All right. This is what our schedule looks like to put budget together. Our staff departments typically start pulling their stuff together in December and into January, and they put together their CIPs and requests and major program stuff in January. March and April is when staff really digs in hard to the budget, so they will have department heads and the manager will have multiple meetings. I mean, it's kind of like anywhere that any of y'all are used to. Your department heads are going to bring everything that they think they need and want to make their department what the board has said they would like their department to be. And then the manager and staff sit down, they scrub through those to try to put together initial cuts to the budget to bring a service level back to the board. So that happens in March and April. In May, at the very beginning, the budget becomes available for public inspection, and we go ahead and put out our public hearing notice for January 2nd, and then our Board of Commissioners start their workshops. So you can about put a clock on it. Sometime around the end of the first week of May, into the second week of May, we are having our budget workshops. And some of you in this room have attended those. I see some faces here that have been to a few recently. We do them typically in this room, so we have full tables to work at instead of crammed at the dais, because we'll have notebooks and pads, and then staff's bringing in documents that maybe the board requests or just supplements their package, so everyone gets a table to work at with a little more space. We dig into the budget for several days, and then we put it together. The thing not on here is the listening session. And I think this is the third year we've done the budget listening session, and that is the goal of our commissioners, is to keep this flowing, but we don't put that as part of our regular meeting schedule because we typically don't know when the board, let's just say, for example, the board did get a budget put together last Wednesday for your review, but if they had needed 2 more workshops, we try to make sure that giving you enough lead time to know that the budget will be ready when you come in. June 2nd will be our public hearing, state mandated, and obviously everybody gets a chance to speak about the budget during that if they would like to. And then June 23rd at our meeting, the board will adopt a fiscal year budget. So July 1, the new year can begin. We're obligated by the state of North Carolina to have a budget by June 30th. There are some provisions where you cannot have a budget and do, kind of a state type continuing resolution. It's horrible. As long as I've been even a commissioner or mayor, we have never done that in the city of Havelock. Most municipalities do not. We try to be done by June 30th. So that's our schedule to make that happen. All right, let's talk about what the proposed budget looks like. So right now, the budget has a tax increase of 3 cents, which would go to 74 cents per hundred. User fees increase in permits by 3%, which is the CPI. And you'll notice CPI a lot. We use the consumer price index on a lot of our fees and things because it keeps a dollar worth a dollar, right? The CPI is a nationally mandated or nationally figured number that is used to say, so $1 today is worth 3% less than $1 was a year ago, is what a 3%. And you all know what inflation is. We're all buying the same eggs, right? So we know that everything is up. We use 3%. That is the general CPI. I won't dig way into the weeds of CPI, but there are all different accounts for CPI. And you can look at construction. You can look at any industry that you would like to. We use the general one, which also typically tends to be one of the lower ones. But because like the construction one, for example, right now is way, way higher than 3%. So we use the general one. We always put our fees at 3%. When we talk about permit fees, we're literally talking about if you're building an addition on your house and you go in and you go get a permit. And our fees will go up by 3% for those. If you are opening a business and you're going to get come in and get a zoning permit and those sorts of things, all those fees would be addressed by that 3% increase. And that's just to make $1. Solid waste that we talked about, there's a 7.5% increase in those utilities, except for stormwater. And that 7.5% should look familiar. We've done that before. And we can dig into it in a little bit when we get to what the individual numbers mean. But we had a listening session that was at length about our utility bills, and we talked about this particular thing. And we brought in a third party from the state of North Carolina to review our wastewater and our water accounts and kind of look at our depreciated assets and look at how we collect money and how we run operations. And while we were on track to do 7.5%, they think it should probably be a little bit more than that, but say we definitely should not be increasing it any less than 7.5% every year. And the board has stuck to that. No increases at the Tourist and Event Center. All state revenues are adjusted per North Carolina League of Municipalities Conference or forecast. What does that mean? It means there's no great way to predict what sales tax is. Like with math, we can kind of predict what our ad valorem taxes are going to be because we know what our tax base is. But we don't really know what sales tax is. The state of North Carolina tracks that pretty heavy. They provide that data to us. We will adjust what we think our sales tax income revenue is based on that forecast. So that's just telling you that we have used state data. We didn't just throw a dart at the wall and say, oh, our sales tax will be $2.8 million this year. No, we track the trends. So we can see if across the state of North Carolina those numbers are going up or they're dropping or they're staying level, and then we adjust that accordingly. We usually get pretty close. I would say Kim and her team get that number pretty close. Every now and then we'll get a little increase we didn't expect, or we'll get a little decrease we didn't expect. The only year I remember being major was during COVID, and that was everybody. Nobody expected sales tax would go through the roof when everybody sat at home and started just buying stuff online, and we got the sales tax benefit. We don't know what's going to happen at the North Carolina legislature yet. We put that up there just as a reminder to the board and to staff and to all of our citizens. We are an entity of the state of North Carolina. Anything that the North Carolina legislature does affects us. They do things that we affectionately call unfunded mandates pretty regularly, and then we have to implement those things without any funding from the state to make that happen because we're an entity of the state. Right now, we are not tracking anything that is going to this year impact our budget. There are a couple things we're very concerned about how that will impact our budget in ensuing years, but we are tracking that, and right now their budget cycle is the same as ours, July 1 to June 30. And if you've noticed the last 2 years, they have not gotten their budget done before July 1. They've kind of gotten deeper into July and into August. So we don't really know when they're going to have their budget done. If they do something crazy, it could impact ours. So we always put that up there. For personnel, we are doing right now it's planned for a cost of living adjustment of 3%, which is reflected by the CPI. So that means every employee of the city of Havelock would get a 3% change in their salary to reflect that a dollar's worth of dollars. So if an employee made $42,000 last year, they will get $42,000 plus their 3%, so that the $42,000 is still the same amount that they got last year. So they can buy the same amount of bread, eggs, milk, etc. That's what a cost of living is. And then we have what's called a longevity of 1.7%. So employees that have been here longer than a year get an automatic 1.7%. And that's been standard for several years now. There are 4 additional positions in this budget, and 2 of them are paramedics, and I could wait and dig into the structure if y'all want to, or I could jump into it now and tell you why we're doing that. But there are 2 paramedics and 2 public workers. One's to take on some added new responsibilities and change how we do business to increase our service level a little bit. And if you look over here, benefits, insurance, and contingencies, these are the things that if you have a business or ever worked at a business, all these things are what you factor in when you're calculating your business items. We have to do the same thing. We are part of the North Carolina State Retirement System. They decide what those numbers are, not us. We're just a part of it. And they are calling for a 9% increase in the retirement expenses that we'll be paying as a city. Our health insurance is at 0% increase. I just want to point out that is incredible. We switched well over a decade ago to self-insured. We used to be a part of different networks. We were Blue Cross, we were MedCost, we were different networks. We went self-insured at least over 10 years ago. It might have been more like 12 or 13 years ago. And it was a little bit of a risk for the city because our pool is not massive at 134 employees, but it has paid serious dividends in not having to charge more taxes to cover our health insurance program for our citizens. And so we've had years where it's spiked a little bit and years where it's been a little bit down, and that all depends on what's happening with our employees. Because we're self-insured, we pay for all the insurance, say when somebody has to go to the hospital or has a ongoing medical situation. But it's resulted in us being able to keep that number at 0 and still be able to provide health insurance for our employees. So that was a huge move, and it has really worked out well for us. Property insurance, we're seeing a 23.6% increase in property insurance. I know all of y'all that have property can raise your hand and say, yeah, we are too. That we are not immune to that. So we have insurance on everything that we own, just like you do, and we're seeing a 23% increase. Our workers' comp, we're at a 0% increase right now. We have no contingency fund, and just to let you know kind of what that is really quick, since gas was really volatile over a decade ago, y'all remember when it was like, $2, $4, $8, $6, and it was like really, really crazy. We were having meetings regularly to augment our department's gas line items. And what we started doing the next year was to create a manager's contingency. And we put money into that line item that the manager has control of, that he can move with just simply notifying the board to cover things like an emergency. Say fuel goes through the roof and all of a sudden Public Works or the fire department, their budget's getting crushed for their ambulances to buy fuel. He can transfer money into that without us having to call a special meeting and slow down, and then they don't have fuel money. We've used it for all kinds of things like that in the past. Some years we don't use it at all. This year, in the original budget, there was $120,000 in that contingency fund, which represents a little over 1 penny of tax rate. And the board decided to take the risk, eliminate the contingency fund. Since the last couple of years, we've really not needed it in any substantial way, and take that money off of the tax rate and just put it back into the general fund. And so what are the risks for that? I mean, everything's a risk analysis. The risk analysis basically is if we have something happen in December and like gas, I don't even want to say it out loud, gas shoots through the roof, or we have a major insurance issue and we need money to cover that insurance issue, let's say. We won't be able to say, manager, take it out of your contingency fund. We will have to have a meeting, discuss it, vote on it, motion second. And that's not a problem for us, and the board is very comfortable with that. It just means either it slows the process down because you got to wait 2 weeks for a meeting, or I got to call a special meeting. And while we are allowed to do that, we also know none of you see special meeting notices probably. When I call one 48 hours from now, it's not like you're monitoring, and then we feel like citizens don't get to come to those meetings. So that's the risk. You're welcome there, obviously. It's just whether or not you see it when we call a special meeting. So that's the risk. The board decided to take that risk and go ahead and eliminate the contingency fund to reduce the burden on the tax rate. All right, this is our fund reserves. In the general fund, that's your blue line up here, and you can see it kind of spikes up and down. The general fund does that a lot of times because of grants, or even still in this whole window receiving money from Hurricane Florence still, where we're still getting money back from money that we spent. So you'll see large dips where we had to spend large amounts and then we get our money back. So our general fund is sitting just over $10 million right now. And our sewer, this is a concerning trend for both our board and for staff, which is that our retained earnings in sewer is dropping dramatically. That's because of all the money that we're spending on major projects, because you got to spend that out of Hyde. Our water, we've seen some decreases in our water fund the last couple of years. They're hovering, both of them hovering just below 4 and then just above 4, respectively. And here's the thing: when you have a sewer, when we do a sewer project, it's never $40,000, right? I mean, we change one valve in the water system, or you have one manhole to replace, and we're talking about 6 figures. It's always 6 figures. So the retained earnings, which is what we call our savings account in those enterprise funds, gets hit pretty aggressively. Powell down here in purple, this is the money that we get from the state of North Carolina based on a calculation on population and road length and all that kind of stuff. That comes from your gas tax. When you pay the state gas tax, we get a portion of that back. That is supposed to be for road maintenance, and it can be used for drainage around roads. We typically use it mostly for paving or paving maintenance. You can see it's a very small number. It has trended up a little bit, and that is because a lot of y'all remember when we do paving, we do it every 2 years now to get the largest bang for our buck. So you can see, this current year we haven't really spent a lot out of that fund, so that we have it ready for a transfer to do a major paving project as we pull that together for this coming year. So we do it every 2 years. If you spend $450,000 a year in paving, or you can spend $900,000 to $1 million every 2 years, you get way more bang for your buck when that contractor's here doing $1 million worth of work than when they just come up for $400,000 or $500,000. So you'll see a little increase typically. Next year, that'll drop back down again because we're going to transfer money out of it and use it for actual paving. Still below $1 million. Okay. We've got our actual, our budgeted, and then our proposed numbers over here, just for you to kind of see a reference over a couple of years. In 23-24, these were our numbers, our total budget being about $26 million. 24-25, that number went up to $31 million. A lot of that was receiving money back from, anytime we receive money back from the federal government, even like when we built the bridge at Woodhaven, we spent all that money up front, and then they reimburse you years later, and so you'll see those spikes happen. Sometimes it's projects in the sewer department. Maybe you get a grant, you execute on that, you spend all that money, and so your numbers will go up and down. Our proposed budget this year is right at $30.6 million. See, general fund holds pretty steady. So just for reference is all that slide is, and I can back up to it when you guys ask questions if you'd like. This is what we're doing out of fund balance. So there's 2 ways when you're balancing the budget to handle the fact that you never have enough money to do all the things that you want to do as a city. And we don't look at it that much differently than you do at your own house. If it's a one-time expense, then it's okay to use your general fund, which is basically our savings account. So if we're thinking we're going to buy a truck, and that truck costs, geez, I don't even know. We'll pick an expensive truck, like we're going to buy an ambulance, but that ambulance we're going to remount multiple times, and it's going to cost, we're going to spend $300,000 or $400,000, but you're going to get 15 or 20 years out of that. That's an appropriate use of your savings account. The same way when your HVAC dies at your house, you're going to use your savings account to pay for your air conditioning unit because you're going to have it for another decade or so. The other way is to change your tax rate. We don't go into general fund to pay for employees. So to get 2 new paramedics, the board does not say we'll pay for that out of savings, because you know what that means. You're out of that money, and next year that expense is right back again and again and again, because making a new employee position and or changing a benefit, for example, we wouldn't fund benefits out of the general fund because that's coming back again. It's just irresponsible. Can you do it for a year or 2? Yes, you absolutely could. What happens if you do that is exactly what happened several years ago when we had to change the tax rate by a dramatic amount, because the board at the time had been making those decisions to pay for that out of the general fund. And then eventually you can't do that anymore. You're going to run out of savings. So the general fund right now, we're taking $881,000 out of the general fund. Staff recommended, I'm going to use round numbers, $772,000-ish out of the general fund. The board decided to take another 102 out of that, which is also how they got the tax rate down by a penny from where it needed to be and still got paramedics in. And so we will cover some expenses out of the general fund at that 881, which will bring your general fund balance from roughly over 10 million to roughly over 9 million. This will be like 9.2 million at the end of this if we hold this proposed budget. Powell funds, you'll have $292,000 that comes out of that purple line that I showed you. That's why I say you're going to see this drop next year, because we're taking $300,000 out of it to put into the paving project, which is what that money's for. And then $776,000 out of water. So that means there are water projects either at the plant or out in the field, or maybe even a piece of equipment, because this represents a lot of things. $776,000 that we're going to take out of our retained earnings in water, which, if I back you up, your water is just above 4 right now. That's going to pull it down to right at $4 million in your, or just a shade under 4 for your water retained earnings. Sewer, we're taking $0 out of retained earnings because, truthfully, that number's too low. So where water might cost $100,000 to fix something, sewer costs, just an example, we just finished that major pipeline behind Annunciation. Y'all have watched contractors working on that for the last year and a half. That was supposed to be $3.5 million. It ended up costing us a little over $7 million by the time we were done. Was it closer to 8, Kimberly? Near 7, right at $7 million. It ended up costing twice as much as was budgeted because of change orders and because of inflation. And that is how projects typically run in sewer. Any sewer project is lots and lots of money. So when you look at, well, you've got almost $4 million in sewer. We just spent $7 on one project. So, and we've got projects around town. Y'all, I know y'all all drive over the places where the road's got a little dip, and you also can see that there's a manhole off on the side, and you know that there's some sort of compaction issue there that needs to be pulled up and fixed. Yeah, if we don't have enough money to even get close to fixing all those. That's why we have to do a few every year and try to plan those out. That's why no money is coming out of that account planned. It doesn't mean money's not going to come out, y'all. Something in the sewer department is going to happen in the next 12 months, and we're going to dip into that account. And so to make sure that it's relatively healthy, we are not planning to take any out to make sure it's ready for whatever emergency pops up. E911, we got $20,000 coming out, and that is, like I say, very restricted fund that can only be used for things to do with 911. And so total of $1.9 million being spent out of our reserves if you look at all the accounts. Okay. This is a breakdown of percentage of revenue, just so you can kind of see where our money comes from. In the general fund, which is your state and shared and collected, that's tax revenue. And then franchise fees and things that the state collects and gives back to us. 3% is your Powell bill. That's that gas tax, paving money we talked about. 48% of your revenue comes from property and motor vehicle tax. 13% comes from fees, permits, contributions, and fund balance. So, for example, fees and permits, that's if you rent a picnic shelter from the rec center. If you rent, if you go in and pay for a planning or a zoning permit, or you get a building inspection permit, a building permit, that's what those typically entail. Expenditures, 60% of the general fund is personnel, 31% is operations, 9% is capital outlay. That's probably a little low for capital outlay, but it's way higher than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, that number was like 2%. Capital outlay means, are we putting money aside to take care of our own assets, our own pieces of equipment, our own buildings and things like that? All right, so this one kind of shows you some initial cuts, and this includes departmental and BOC cuts. So when the budget came out of that schedule, we talked about where staff had kind of beat it up for 2 months, and they try to cut what they know they can cut, and then it comes to the board, and then the board sits there and cuts more things. We've already cut a little over $2 million out of the budget, and this can represent. And it, by the way, if you want to see a line item budget, we usually keep one right there at City Hall. You can come in and view it, go through, and you can see what actually these cuts are. But this is everything from adjustments in training. It is overtime hour adjustments. It's not buying equipment that staff really thinks they need, but we're going to put it off for another year, things like that. So these cuts range all over everything, and you'll see for every line item. The only one without a cut is Public Works streetlights, because we don't have a choice. If you want streetlights, we pay that number that Duke, Carter Craven Electric, and New Bern Electric charge us on those poles, and you don't really have a choice unless we turn off streetlights. For that number to have a cut, we're cutting down streetlights. Okay. In the water fund, so switch to enterprise fund, our revenue usage is being adjusted by 7.5%. 38% is personnel, 46% is operations, 16% is capital outlay. So that would be replacing pieces of equipment in the water system. Same on our sewer fund, 7.5%. Revenue adjustment, 25% is personnel, 62% in operations. Just an example of how much more expensive it is to operate within the wastewater fund just to run the plant, just the things that we have to do to make the plant operational. 13% capital outlay. That'd be planning for the future and, putting money aside to do major repairs. So what does that mean? How does that actually affect the average customer? Again, I know some of you don't use 5,000 gallons. And here's the example I like to use. If it's you and your wife or you're by yourself, this is probably you, 2,000. Some of you probably are using 1,800 gallons. If you have a family of 4-ish or more, you're definitely in the 4,500 to 5,000 range. If you are a high user, say you have multiple families in your house or you have 6 kids. Bob Precinct, I used to joke, if y'all remember Bob, he was always in that because he had 5 daughters plus him and his wife. That is a very, very heavy user. 9,000 gallons typically is more of a commercial or business use. So 5,000 is our average. And the bill right now for your entire utility bill, so that's water, sewer, solid waste, and yeah, that says utility bill. So just water and sewer. Okay. So $150 is what you're paying for just water and sewer right now. $161 is what it would go to per month. 7.5% makes an 11% change. And if you're down here in the 2,000, it's an $8 change to your monthly bill. All right. Solid waste. Rate adjustment of 7.5%, 31% personnel, 69% operating, 0% capital outlay. That is because a lot of that is contract. What is not contract that we own in that account are things like the trucks that usually come pick up the brown, white, and green waste. And so we typically let that fund grow until it's time to buy a truck. We have not had to finance a truck for this account since it started 15 years ago. Because this is one of those examples I like to use is if you adjust your rates according to CPI, like you're supposed to, then it will fund itself. So we have not changed the contract except by CPI and then 7.5% the last 2 years. And we've been able to have a balanced account so that we're actually saving for when that knuckle boom dies, that you have the money to purchase the knuckle boom. Current residential rate is $23.11. Your new rate would be $24.84. If you're commercial, if you're in the room and you happen to be using it as a commercial, which we do offer on the contract, $28.49 goes to $30.63. In the stormwater fund, there are no changes. 45% of the cost right now is personnel, 19% in operating, 36% for capital outlay. And just a reminder, everybody here that owns a house is 1 ERU. And an ERU calculates up to square footage, but it doesn't matter if your house is 6,000 square feet. It's still 1 ERU. Where the calculation matters if you have a commercial property. Commercial properties are larger and have a much more impervious surface. So there's math that's done on their property to decide how many ERUs they pay. So all of us that just own a house are paying $4 a month. And that is not going to change. And the commercial non-residential are paying $4 per ERU. So Walmart, I don't even know how many ERUs they are. I'll just say it's a lot, right? Because it's a huge building with a huge parking lot. Westbrook Shopping Center, that's a large ERU calculation. So they really carry the burden of the stormwater fund, which they should because their properties create the most of actual stormwater that the city has to deal with. Tourist Center Fund, $663,000, 19% of that comes from rents and services. 19% comes from the occupancy tax. If you stay in any hotel in Craven County or any of your friends or family do, we get a portion of that money through the Tourism and Development Authority of Craven County back to us. It's about $97,000 roughly a year that we receive. And that goes directly into that account to support this building. And then 62% is other. That's usually a general fund appropriation to cover whatever balance we end up with at the end of the year. Because no convention center or tourist center actually breaks even in the entire world. Even the one in Greenville, it's the hotels make the money and the convention center's there as a convenience. Ours doesn't make money like all of them, and so we subsidize that with general fund dollars. Expenditures, that's 47% personnel, 35% operating. That includes our exhibits, which is all the things you see out front, and painting the airplanes. That's included in that number. 18% capital outlay. Okay. This is our debt trends, just to show you City of Havelock's historical debt, or the debt that we have right now. And total, we've got $18 million of debt, and that is spread across multiple funds. You'll see the lion's share of that is really, this is down here in the outfall line, the $7.5 million. That was the outfall line we had to put in, man, I don't even know now, 14 years ago, to get our effluent out of the creek and into the river. And that was a almost $11 million project when we did it, $10 million and change. This is an I&I project, which is, this shows you the difference in how much things cost in sewer. An I&I project was when we went in and we slip lined some lines and tried to fix some of the older lines without digging them up at the high cost. And that was a USDA loan. And then Joe's Branch is a drainage project that gets paid for out of Powell funds every year. That's your gas tax dollars coming back to us to pay for that drainage. And then these are the things that we still have loans on at the City of Havelock in the general fund. The board has, in the current budget, the board, in part of balancing the budget, was to pay off this fire truck early and then take that $60,000 and roll it into a capital fund in ensuing years to pay for the needs we'll have in the future for fire trucks and ladder trucks that we know we're going to have to replace in the future. And so part of that plan was to go ahead and pay that off, that $250,000 off now, and that was reflected in the general fund number that we had up there. Pay that off now, and, well, actually, I think we were using some funds we had in another CIP, right? And then $56,000 annual payment could be used in the future to just be put into that account for a CIP to plan for future fire trucks, and go ahead and eliminate that piece of debt. You'll see the next piece of debt that comes off is up here at 2036. That's the senior center. Then after that, the West End Fire Station in 2040. One advantage, we use a lot of USDA because we are eligible, and they typically tend to be very low percentage rates. And so it's a scary thing when the auditor comes in and tells us we could have, an incredible amount more debt than this. It makes our board nervous. We have not taken on debt in quite a few years. And it's usually for projects that are just massive. All right. So what does that look like? It means the budget is balanced at a tax rate of 0.74 cent. 1 penny of tax rate generates $99,000. We talked about that at the beginning. And so that is this year's number. Last year was $98,000, I think, in the other slide. Now it's $99,000, essentially. Average residential home value is $186. Permit fees increased by 3% CPI. Utilities 7%. That's just a recap. So what is the cost of a tax increase to you as an average home value? If you have an average home of $186, that's $55 a year, which is $18 per penny, basically $18 and change. It's a little less than $20 for each penny that changes at your own address if you're at 186. And yeah, if your house is worth $280,000, then we would be happy to sit down and do the math and tell you what that number would be. But we do the average up here. So the average is an additional $55 a year, or $4 a month is what that comes up to on your tax bill. So we put together some references on what that, just some trying to contextualize. This is what that looks like. All right, and here's our schedule again. And to add in here, after the board hears your input, they may add even another workshop to sit down and talk about further items, which we'll do tonight if we need to do that. But as it sits right now, June 2nd will be the public hearing. We always schedule a budget workshop for right after the public hearing, and that's so whatever the board hears at the public hearing, if they want to go back and sit down and refigure anything or try to work something different out, they have that opportunity in the schedule. And then the 23rd, we come back together for budget adoption. And this is a reminder I'll leave up there at the end for how you can get a hold of us besides just at a listening session. So I know that's a whole lot of information. I'll back up to this, which is kind of a general slide. And then for any questions that y'all might have or want to talk about, we're happy to do that. Just again, please come up to the mic to ask the question so that we can make sure the folks that are watching on the live stream can hear it. and I'll move to whatever slide we need to if we want to talk about something. So whoever would like to go first, feel free.
Good evening, Anthony Willett, 1 Evelyn Circle. So, got to see me at every single one of our meetings that we've had, right? Put a lot of thought into coming up here, and honestly, I want to start off with going back. I honestly think, if it sounds familiar to anybody, I think we're in another decade of challenge. We're kind of stagnant. We've seen that. You guys have spoke about that on the growth of the town. A lot of you campaign on trying to make it better. First, before I get into any of that, one thing I want to state, well, when you said at the budget meeting is like it's not about the rate, it's about the levy. So you used Newport. Average, little research there, average home value is $329,000 and their tax rate is 5.15. So what that means for everybody here, your tax rate, you're still going to pay on average $300 less than your neighboring town with this 3-cent increase. Keep that in mind. You're still going to pay on average $300 less than a neighboring town. Now, you have your capital outlay. You guys have been talking about streets. I know that I've heard from several meetings. It's a lot of foot stomping from what I've heard from every workshop, every regular meeting, every special meeting. There's a lot of foot stompings from a lot of professionals in the room that are saying, hey, we need to get our funds up so we can start doing these projects, so we can make it better. And from what I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, this budget is just keeping the lights on. Almost. There's a few little increases in service with paramedics, with vehicles, we get rid of stuff. But what you guys are agreeing to right now, we're still cutting stuff, we're still raising taxes, and it's just going to be the same thing as last year when it comes to majority of the services. Am I wrong?
Right. The only addition would be that there is money put in there to do a paving package for the year. That'd be the only increase.
There is. But then we also know that there's tails on that too. When we talked about that, you have uplift stations. When you're going to have to tear up a road, it's not just the road that goes down. You know that that's another fund that we're going to have to fund a project from. And I've heard, again, more foot stomps, that you're either going to gamble and we're not going to take care of this stuff by putting money into it and putting away for it. We're going to take a gamble and see if it doesn't happen this year, or we could start putting away now and maybe we could take care of it proactively. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I've heard at every single meeting, is that we're just going to try and see if we can't get through. We're going to raise it just enough to keep the lights on, but not much is going to change. And if you've run on that ticket of, I want this town to change, I've lived here long enough. I've been here 20 years. I've lived here for my entire military career, and change is something that is not seen very much. So with everything that I've seen in the budget, everything I've seen on there, and if you haven't looked at the budget, there's a bunch of recommendations on there, and you'll notice that one of those columns, there's a lot of negative numbers because of the difference, because of all the cuts that we're trying to do. Now, if you're cutting a budget and you're still raising taxes, and we're at some levels losing services because of what we had to cut, that doesn't seem sustainable to me. So, unpopular opinion, I might get shot before I get through the door. But if you're gonna have to raise it to where it's something that matters. Because everybody here has said, and everybody here has heard, it's not going down. So keep it the same, and we live the same way that we've been living for years. Or you actually tell your board, hey, I'm willing to put a little bit more out of my pocket, and maybe we can start seeing some actual change this year, maybe even a little bit longer. And from our board, it's not on you guys to help us budget our own money. You know that it costs what it costs. Like, let the individual figure out where that comes from. And honestly, at a rate of a beer a month or a pack of cigarettes a month, that's pittance. Like, I could do without a beer. I could do without 2 beers. All right? It's a hard thing to say. It really is. But if you want this town to get better, And this isn't to the board. You guys just listed it. It's for everybody else. If you want this town to get better, you better start investing in it. You better be willing for it to go up. You better be willing to pay for it. Nothing good comes free. So if you want this to be better, if you want this to eventually to go down, and how that goes down is by home values going up so they have to lower the rate, then we invest in ourselves. You're either willing to do that, or it's just going to be the same thing. We're going to hear the same listening session every year. And then finally, another thing that stormwater. How's that new manager coming?
Still, we've had one interview.
Yeah, and I know that I've heard it in meetings before. We're just not competitive. So make us competitive so we can get good people in. Make us competitive so people can stay. Make us competitive so I'm happy when my kid comes back from college or their job. I'm happy and proud for them to come back to the home they grew up in and see that it got better while they're gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. So two philosophy things I'll mention that I did not belabor at the beginning, but because we do talk about tax rate, and I'll add to what Tony said, which is the rate and the levy are two different things. If Atlantic Beach can brag that they have the lowest tax rate in the state of North Carolina, which is true, but everybody there is paying $5,000 a year in taxes because the properties are worth more money. If I told you could pay me 70% of a dollar or 20 cents of $1,000, I guarantee you're going to pay me 70 cents of a dollar. You'll take that rate all day. It's about the levy. Our average house value is 186. That is relatively low in our region. So while our rate is the highest, that is absolutely true. Our levy is not. And we didn't put a slide up there this year and compare that. It's not always apples to apples. Some cities do things a little differently, and some of them don't even calculate for the average home. They just say our ad valorem is this, our rate is this is what we charge. They don't even try to look at what it affects the average homeowner. But our rates, while they were the highest, our levy, when we put that up there a year ago, were like third from the bottom in Eastern North Carolina. And I know that it is absolutely true. If you go move into the county, you will pay less taxes because you will not be in a municipality. You will not pay city taxes anywhere. That's true if you live in Raleigh and you want to move into Wake County, or if you want to live in Moorhead and move into Carteret County. That is absolutely true. But none of you can, I would wager, sell the house that you have, buy the same house in any city around us and pay less taxes. You could maybe buy a smaller house there and pay less taxes. But I know I cannot buy my house on my property in any city around us and pay less taxes than I pay in Havelock. That we've proven that. That's math. It doesn't make it nice to pay taxes, don't get me wrong. The other philosophy piece I'm going to throw in there that Tony kind of hit on really quick is this. And this is a struggle for every board because nobody wants to change a tax or a fee. But the philosophy choices are either you do something every year so that you at least survive, worst case scenario. Or maybe you even say we're going to add service, and so we're going to charge 3 cents, 4 cents. Or you wait 3 or 4 years and you get a 12-cent increase. And even though, like personally, as I would rather, if you were running it for me, I'd wait 4 years and let me keep my money for those 4 years, and then I'll give it to you later. But it seems like most citizens and commissioners typically would prefer to just see that change a little bit every year, and you just adjust for that. That is kind of how the board has been looking at the last couple of budgets since the reevaluation. Rather than try to hit something really, really hard all at once, make sure you're trying to keep up as you go along. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just had a question. I think it was 12 or 13 slide where you showed all the budget decreases. And I noticed police and fire departments both had kind of large decreases. What is being cut from those budgets?
Kimberly, you want to address that specifically? Because it would be a myriad of things.
So it is an option. Some things were CIPs and things like that were cut. There was some adjustments in regards to health insurance at the beginning. We were looking at whether or not we were going to need to do an increase. That was actually put into the department's budget. So when we reevaluated and decided we were going to keep it the same, that did show up as a cut just because of how it happened in the process. Because those departments are so large with so many people.
Right, so they have a lot of people in them, so changes to the health insurance show up as a big cut. And the other one, she mentioned capital outlay. What does that mean? It means we're not buying equipment, or we are not funding a capital improvement project, which is where a lot of these cuts come from in the bigger departments. So we build a CIP plan for every department in the city, and that includes things like, just to use fire EMS. I'm gonna keep picking on Tom because he's like right in my sight right there. Ambulances are expensive. The equipment in the ambulance is expensive. The breathing apparatus, the firefighters, those are all expensive. So we don't just pay for them year one. We build a CIP that says you need $150,000 in 5 years. So split that up. We're doing $30,000 every year out of our money into that account. Well, those get cut pretty quick. When you start running low on money, one of the first things that staff is going to cut and the board are CIPs. We'll say, okay, we just won't fund that CIP. And when it comes time to buy it, we're just going to have to write a check. The same way I can use our own houses as an example. You might put $100 away every month for for your HVAC. You're putting $100 a month away. You're putting $1,200 a year for the next 10 years so that you'll be prepared, right? Or next 5 years. And 1 month is tight, and you're like, well, guess what's not going in the savings account is that $100 for my HVAC. I'm going to buy the groceries. And so the city does, I mean, it's a micro example, but the city, that's where you'll see a lot of those big cuts, Ms. Fedina, is you'll see something planned for saving, and then we say, okay, well, if we're tight, we're not going to fund that. Yes, sir. Come on up.
Evening. I just have one question just for clarification because I didn't see it or maybe I missed it. Vehicles, are they increasing as well? Are they part of that 3% on property tax, or is that going to be something separate?
You mean the motor vehicle fee?
Yes.
That was not projected to change at all.
Okay, so
That would stay the same. Yes, sir.
All right, I didn't see, so I just wanted to clarify.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
So the 750 stays the same, but the actual property tax for the vehicle doesn't.
Right. So to get into the weeds, the $7.50 that you're asking about stays exactly the same. That is not going to
you. Yeah,
change.
I was just trying to make sure the property tax 3% was also there as well.
Right.
Because I saw mostly about the houses and homes.
But for the property tax on the vehicle, that will affect it. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
My question is why, where does that money go? $7.50.
From the motor vehicle tax?
We're already getting taxed by the city. Now we're getting another tax. Where's that go?
So that money for us goes directly to road work. And, excuse me. So for the last couple of years, it has gone into doing repairs and I would say ancillary paving work. And then in future years, when we do a paving project, it can go directly to paving. But the board committee would all go to asphalt work, all go to paving work. So it's all wrapped around paving. So if the board didn't do it,
Where does the other vehicle tax go?
that goes into the general fund and gets used for all kinds of things.
So why aren't you drawing from the general fund to pave?
We could. The reason the board chose the motor vehicle fee that year was to not have to change the tax rate by that amount. The philosophy being, if you have one car and you have a house, then you pay a certain amount of taxes. If you have 5 cars in a house, then the motor vehicle fee would cover the fact that you have more cars on the road. It's really and or. If you didn't have that $750, then it would affect the tax rate to have that money in the general fund.
As a budget person, isn't that more complicated to you? I'll be honest with you. If you'd have slapped that into the other part, I probably wouldn't have had a problem with it. But you're taxing me once, and then you're taxing me again for the same thing. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then I went to the town hall and asked the young lady at the window, and she said, oh, that's something the county puts on your tax bill. No explanation. And I called the county, and the county said, no, that's what Havelock tells us to put on there.
So by going the route of doing the motor vehicle tax, that actually gives it an explicit purpose. If it's part of just property tax for that on the rate of the vehicles, we could use it for any purpose. So it was the board's plan to kind of put something towards paving each year to make it specifically for paving.
Right.
So we only do paving every 3 years?
2.
2 years.
Our plan is the current plan for the last several years has been every 2. We learned that during Florence.
Do we do any patching?
We do.
Because there is a pothole that I've been going over for the last 40 years. And I'm not joking. It's right there at Ford. Right there at the Ford place.
Is it on Highway 70?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
it is.
so that's not ours. That would be why. But
Why aren't we calling the state?
so we probably do. I can ask. We can make sure Patrick calls again. But that is DOT, and we don't have any control over that. But Patrick does typically let them know when things are wrong with our roads to get them fixed.
When the bypass is done, does that become city property?
No, sir. It'll still be DOT's. Unless at some point DOT tries to give it to the city and the city makes a really foolish decision and accepts that, which I would suggest that'd be very foolish. But no, DOT will keep that.
And my other question is, we're asking 5,000 residents to pay a bill that should be more like 10,000 residents. We've got outlying areas. I live in Kettner Heights. Pinecone Lane, on the other side of that, Melody Lane, is county. Why? Why hasn't the city made an attempt to go after the rest of these communities? We're supplying them services, because I see the fire truck go down there. That's a given. Same thing with the ambulance. But they're not paying us. Now, I realize some of that comes back from the county, but we're 5,000 people trying to fund a town twice that size. I think it's a little outrageous that 7%, 7.5, is pretty high on the tax rate. I've been watching it, and we're probably one of the highest ones. And I live on Pinecone Lane. I get very little service from the town. My road's dipped, sewer's collapsing. Know that for a fact. It holds water. Everybody in that neighborhood goes, what are you gonna do? Okay? So we see this money going in, but we're not seeing a whole lot of it coming out. That's my biggest problem. I work with Bridgeton, I worked a little bit with New Bern, and I find their budget is a whole lot better with the volume of people. And they bring in more people. Why aren't we going after those people?
So that part of the question is relatively short and sweet, which is we're not allowed to. Annexation was changed 15 or 18 years ago, where voluntary annexation is really the only way for annexation to happen now. I'm not saying the board would want to take in Kettner Heights or Greenfield Heights or any of those areas that are not, but even if they did, they cannot by state law go in and involuntarily annex. In order for, say, Kettner Heights to annex into the city, everybody that lived in there would have to agree to voluntarily annex in, and then they could come in.
New Bern annexed Sandy Point through sewage systems failures. Why does it have a lot?
Because they all volunteered to annex.
When their septic tank failed, the city made them, the county made them hook into the city.
Well, I would also say people could individually voluntarily annex. They could one at a time, if they wanted to, try to come into the city of Havelock. That would be a very slow process, but that would be the only way. They have to do it voluntarily. It cannot be involuntary. The law doesn't allow it. Well, there's also, Danny's mentioned, there's also the conversation of would you want to annex. The ROI on annexing an existing system is very difficult. And while they think the math works, we've had plenty of neighborhoods that math has not worked out. There's a lot better opportunity for that ROI to be successful on the front side of a development being built. So if you want to talk, what does the future look like in releasing some of the burden off the pressure, or release some of the pressure, is when the bypass is finished, which, by the way, now we're hearing that's fall of 2026. But when the bypass is finished, there are two major developments that do want to build and annex directly in the city voluntarily because they want water and sewer. And so as a city, we've been planning to get those utilities out to those areas for several years now and are actively doing that. The board actually let the contract on engineering for both projects to go towards Stately Pines and down Lake Road for the bypass. Neither one of those is going to happen before the bypass is done. And then to what scale will be determined by the market and their appetite for development. But the other one, for example, the townhomes that were just approved by the board a couple of months ago between McDonald Downs and Tucker Creek, that's the kind of development within a city that does bring in significant revenue without adding any real new services. So it's very compact. It's in one location. We already have water there. We already have sewer there. It's a very short extension of a water line. And once a developer has built that out, we will see all that income both in the water and sewer and solid waste funds and on our tax rate, but we won't be extending ourselves to provide services because we're already providing those services in that same neighborhood. Those are the kinds of ones that start releasing pressure off of those of us that have been living here for a very long time paying that bill. You could see it all over the state. Any community that becomes a bedroom community that doesn't grow anymore, your tax rate is going to increase pretty dramatically to provide the same level of service. So just to flip the coin over, because Tony was talking about, if we want new things, if you want new services, the option for the board to not raise the tax rate or to not change things is to cut actual services that we provide today. Staff's requirement, both from the board and the state of North Carolina, is to bring the board a budget that is balanced to provide the same level of service as last year. And the board could say, we don't want to do something anymore and reduce your tax rate as a result. And a couple years ago when we did the first listening session, we had a slide up there that showed a lot of those values and we got feedback from citizens. So I'll just give you an example. You could cut animal control. It is done by Craven County. The board has had that discussion, at least a dozen times, probably every year at some level we talk about it because the county does provide animal control. We also provide it as a municipality. It costs about a penny on the tax rate. It costs a shade over $100,000 to provide that service to you. That's one animal control officer, 2 part-time animal control officers, plus the equipment and the building. And you could cut that, and that would save about a penny on the tax rate, which, reminder, right now that's about $18 a year. But the service drop means, and this is what the board has always discussed, is the service level drop is you will now no longer have what we call immediate animal control. We respond very quickly in animal control issues, and if any of you have, our department now is very much more efficient than they even used to be, and if any of you have dealt with animal control in the last 6 months, all I've heard is great things. Citizens come to me saying they're doing a great job. They're getting there when a dog is loose or we have a dangerous animal or something within 30 minutes. 20 minutes, sometimes 10 if they're in the neighborhood. They know the animals, they know the neighborhoods, they know what to look for. That would go away, and now we'd be relying on the county. The county's minimum response time to us will probably be 30 to 45 minutes, and that would be on an absolute perfect scenario. It's probably more like an hour or two. Not picking on them, but they cover the entire county, and if you know, our county is massive, so they're going all the way from Cove City and Dover all the way to here and down into Harlow, and they're centrally located. But they only have so many animal control officers. And right now, if they have to assist us, or calls in Harlow are an hour. And so the level of service would drop. We also have a dog park. That would mean we probably would have to close the dog park. How are we going to have a dog park but no animal control officer to go out there if we have issues with dogs? We have a leash law that you're not really going to be able to enforce if you don't have animal control officers. You can tell your police officers to enforce it, but they can't put an animal in their patrol car that's unsafe for the next person getting in the patrol car because you don't know what kind of allergy situation. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why the chief won't do that, and we're not going to have police officers wrangling dangerous dogs. We're not going to do that. So there would be a significant service level drop, and the board has beat that up. And honestly, I think last year it was like 3-2 to keep animal control. And a lot of it comes down to what you're willing to sacrifice as a community. And I look at it from the flip side. I don't want it to sound like a sales pitch because I don't mean it to be that way. But if I came to your house and I said, if you gave me $18 a year, I will take care of any stray dog in your neighborhood. If you have a dangerous animal, I will quarantine it. I'll have a hearing. I'll hold the owner accountable. We'll provide you a dog park to walk your dog in off leash with some accoutrements in it. And at events, we'll make sure that animals are either allowed to be there or not allowed to be there. We'll do that for you for $18 a year. I bet everybody in the room will be like, yeah, where do I sign up for that? Right? And I know that sounds like a sales pitch, but it is the other side of when you start talking about making cuts, what's the actual impact to the cut? The other one, recreation is $1 million. We do not have to provide recreation. We spend $1 million a year in recreation. $250,000 of that is your senior center. And your seniors, no offense to anybody that's not as young in this room as other people in the room, but seniors make up less than 10% of our population now. We spend $250,000 of taxpayer dollars every year providing them a senior center and a lot of the ones that attend aren't even from our city. They come in from other cities because our senior center is nicer and they have friends there. So the board does not have to provide that. They could close that and they could cut $250,000 worth of tax rate off. That's 2.5 cents off your tax rate. You could shut down all of rec. You don't have to have a recreation department. And that's $700,000. And you could maybe try to turn it over to the county and allow them to run some programs in the city for us. But those are just things, because you're not cutting fire and EMS. You're not cutting police. You're not going to cut your finance folks, or we'll be in real trouble. You're going to have planning and inspections. One of the few things we do have to provide certain parts of that. The state requires that we provide certain parts of that. So you're not cutting those things. You're not cutting utilities unless you want to give your system over to somebody else. And we talked about this at another one, but anybody who wasn't there, systems around us have taken their municipal systems and given them to private parties, like Aqua. Y'all have all maybe heard of them. Some people in this room, our manager and his property that he grew up on is now owned by a third party. And his rates, did they triple or double? Triple. First month that Aqua, or the company that bought their system, his first bill was 3 times higher than the last one, because they have to make a profit. They're paying for CEOs and stocks and whatever the heck. They're making a profit. We're not. We're trying to break even. So we've seen it in Carteret County and everywhere around us. People are selling their systems and your bill quadruples, triples, doubles. At the best case scenario, your bill doubles. So that's not really an option if we want to try to keep rates low and have a responsible system. So it really falls down to things like this building. You want to cut this building. You could say that's $600,000 you don't have to spend, but you won't have a meeting place for things like this. You won't have a place for prom. I mean, your Havelock prom happens in this building. Pam has a schedule for the entire year of recurring events that this is the only building in the city of Havelock that can accommodate those things. And so this isn't about making money here. This is about providing a service to the community. But you don't have to provide that. You could shut this building down and let the building rot and save you a couple cents on your tax rate. And so I'm just throwing, those are the things the board weighs typically. Okay, well, if you want to cut, what can you cut? And I know everybody likes to think that there's like this massive amount of fat that we could just go in and start chopping off in the city of Havelock. And that is just not the case. This year, the fat we had was the contingency fund, which is our backup plan so the board can move faster in the event of an emergency. So now we're going to move at the speed of government in the emergency instead, which should be okay, but it's a little bit of a risk. You have 134 employees. Your HR department is right there. I introduced your HR director. That's the entire department. She does all the HR for 134 employees. That's how we do it at the city of Havelock. You want a comparison? Now you got me on a soapbox. Morehead City is 7,000 less people than us in their municipal city limits. They have 201 employees. We have 134. New Bern has 500, and if I pull my phone, I can tell you exactly. They have 500 and something employees. They have more police officers than we have employees. It's a different city. I get that. Both of them are different cities. But we are very small sized in our operations at the city of Havelock. And every employee sitting here wants to nod even if they don't feel comfortable doing it, because they all know they're doing 3 people's jobs every day, and that's what our board expects of them. That's how we do try to keep the levy that you actually pay lower. So those are the options. And if you feel like right now you feel inspired, you just want to come up and say, cut animal control. I don't care about animal control. Feel free. Like we really do want your input, even if it's not a question. Feel free, because you've got all your board except for one, and she just happens to be she's out of town tonight. But we are going to meet again, and having your input is important. So If anybody wants to say, I'll stay all night. I say that every time. They all know I'll stay all night. I'll answer any question you want and take any opinion you want. Come on up, Jim.
Hey, Mayor Lewis, Jim Schmidt, 437 Fox Hunt Lane. This is just information for residents of Havelock. To report a road repair request to the NCDOT, you can use the online contact system or the contact and report link on the NCDOT website. The website allows you to report various issues, including potholes, missing signs, drainage problems, and road debris. For potholes specifically, NCDOT aims to repair them on state-maintained roads within 2 business days. I've used it before and it works. So all these roads out here, Highway 70, the issues we have out there, go online, fill out the form, and usually within 2 days to a week, they'll come fix them.
And I'll use that as an example to explain how the city of Havelock tries to be a good neighbor. If you've been to Dunkin' Donuts recently, and you after a rain event, and you know that drain by their drive-through, it turns into Lake Dunkin' Donuts, and they've got the issue there. They have an issue with some stuff in their parking lot, but also DOT has some issues, and we have some issues on the other outfall end of it. But our team in trying to, now you got 3 players in the game that all want to deflect on who's going to pay for the problem. Our folks went out there with the camera, and they cameraed that entire line with it's really our wastewater camera. We use it in stormwater as well. But they cameraed the entire line to try to find out what the problem was and see if anything we were doing was a little bit of an issue. And whatever it was, we would then correct our part. We actually jet vac, whatever you call it, we cleaned it, even though it's under DOT's road, so that if you were trying to get your coffee in the morning at Dunkin' Donuts, you don't need 4-wheel drive to get in the drive-through line. And it did work temporarily. It helped a lot. But there are bigger issues. We're taking care of our part, and they have notified DOT what's going on, and the owner knows what they need to do. But just to be a good neighbor, we said, okay, we got to do something for our citizens and our business owners. So we stepped in, and I mean, did it cost us any money? It cost us time, and we have 134 employees. So they spent a couple of days cameraing it and then going back and cleaning it out and investigating the other end. And we will spend money on our drainage part here soon to make sure that water is going where it's supposed to go, back into the Slocum Creek there. But we do try to be a good partner with DOT. We do contact them a lot. Same thing, if you just FYI reminder, your recycling is not done by the city of Havelock. We do not do recycling. That is Craven County. But if you don't get picked up, or you can still call the city. Patrick and Melanie still call up there to GFL. They call the county and say, you have an issue down here. We still will be that conduit for you, even though it's not our responsibility. What else do you all want to know or ask? And we also are going to hang out. So if everyone is more comfortable doing it in a casual setting, we can handle whatever business the board wants to handle real quick and adjourn. And then we can stand around and talk about whatever you want to talk about. And if you have specific questions like, what's the exact number for paving? I mean, I'm going to tell you it's roughly $1 million that's planned, but Kimberly can tell you probably within a couple $100. And if you gave her time to pull out her laptop, she could tell you exactly what it is. So even if you want to know what did it cost for training in the police department last year, we can tell you that number. It's all public record. But if I did that presentation, we would be here 4 days from now. The line item budget is massive. So this is kind of trying to hit the highlights of what we feel like is affecting you in ways that you may or may not like. So anything else? Karen?
Be able to reach it. Mine is not even a question. Mine is to simply say thank you to all of these people. All of these department heads work tirelessly all year long, but for months doing your budget. It's not easy. I've sat in that seat for 14 years, and it's not easy making those decisions. So we all find it easy to sit on that side and complain and find fault. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Until you've sat in those seats, it's not an easy decision. So all I'd like to do is say thank you for all that you do for all of us. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
It's got to go back in, right?
She got it.
Break it, Chad.
Yes, sir.
Hi. Name's Eric, 1105 Lightwood Court. To kind of piggyback off what Tony had said, I'm kind of with him on, if we want more out of the city, we're going to have to pay more out of the city. I did have a couple questions. Obviously, no easy task to ask taxpayers to raise taxes. It always sounds bad. But out of the cuts that the city decided to make, what are some of the significant services that the city wanted to provide that we decided, hey, we can wait? Or, I know Public Works, there's like 5 line items and they're getting hammered. What are some of the things the city or Public Works was looking at, trying to take care of that we aren't able to take care of, for one reason or another?
So I can give you a few specific examples that the board actually discussed through what we call budget issue papers. So one that they're going to deal with over there is a truck. They've got a 1-ton flatbed truck that they use, and it is right now it needs about $4,000 worth of repairs. It's an older vehicle. Is it 15 years old? 8? So 2007, we're still using it. It does have some mechanical issues, but to replace it with what we actually need, it actually doesn't do exactly what we need anymore. The city's evolved past that over the last 18 years. And so we're using it. They're getting the job done, but not as efficiently. The board decided instead of spending $100,000 to buy a new truck, he's going to put $4,000 in that truck, and we're going to milk that baby for another year. And if it blows up, this is the risk level assessment. If it blows up in August, then the board's going to have to talk about will they buy a truck out of the general fund. So that's one example. Services, recreation is an example of that. We provide a summer camp, and that summer camp isn't wildly popular in the city. Like the waiting list is 3 times longer than the actual number of people that can get in because it's a reasonable value, and our team does a great job putting it together. They use actual teachers from the school system, and they get to go different places around. It's a great program. In order to make the program better and more efficient, they really need a couple passenger vans. And those passenger vans would allow them to not be beholden to the county. Right now, we have to get a school bus from the county, and then we have to have their driver to drive it. Sometimes that can be difficult during summer school. And Kelvin said, well, if we could get 2 15-passenger vans, then we could have more freedom in what we do with our kids during summer camp, but also, from a service perspective, open up a new opportunity at the senior center for seniors to go take day trips. So to go to Atlantic Beach for the day, or to ride to Crabtree Valley Mall and just shop for the day as a senior group, go to a show in Raleigh and come back. That would have allowed them to increase that service level had we funded those vans. Right now, the board's not funding those vans. They're like, we don't have the money for that, so we're not buying the vans. So it's typically things like that. And those are 2 very specific examples of some things that the board decided we weren't going to step into.
Just want to say thank you guys. I can afford to not eat out a couple times a year and afford the tax increase. So I appreciate the couple employees and services that we're adding on. So thank you.
So since nobody asked about the paramedic thing, I thought somebody would. So I'll explain that really fast. Tom's going to correct me if I get it wrong. Right now we run 2 shifts on ambulances, and what these paramedics would be 2 paramedic positions that are not running 24-hour shifts. They will be day shift paramedics. So they'll work 8 to 5, 8 to 4, and they will be there to be on calls on ambulances every day during that period only. That is our highest peak times because that's when people are out doing stuff and people are driving around and all that. So it would augment our current level of service with 2 paramedics that will have a pretty reasonable quality of life for a paramedic, truthfully, to be able to just work those hours every day. But the reason we're doing that is, 1, to provide a higher level of service to take care of you guys, because we understand fire and EMS is, and in this case, they're only paramedic. I say fire and EMS because they're together, but in this case, they would only be paramedics. When a fire goes off, they are not going to be throwing on the gear, which, by the way, all the rest of your paramedics are firefighters as well. So they're transitioning to that back and forth. These would be paramedic only, and they would give us the ability to not be in a position to turn away as many calls as we do. We were at level 0, we call it 800 times. 860 times last year we were at level 0. What does that mean? Level 0 means in that moment we did not have an ambulance with a crew to send out to help somebody in the city of Havelock. It means both of our ambulances were out doing good work. They're going to the hospital, they're doing a call, they're at a car accident, whatever. 860 times. So that's like 3 times a day that we are at level 0. And what do we do at level 0? The mutual aid immediately goes to Cherry Point. They back us up. And then it can go to areas around us, Newport, whatever, right? We do that for them. They go to level 0. We assist them as well. So what does that mean from a dollar perspective? Every call that we don't put in an ambulance and run that somebody else does is revenue we don't get to collect, because part of the way we get our money in the EMS world is by billing. So if any of you have been off in an ambulance, you know you're going to get a bill for that. And maybe you've got good enough insurance, it just gets covered. But if not, we pay a third party to do that billing for us. We have a very high collection rate, probably the highest in the county. I bet still, we used to anyway. We have a very high collection rate because we use a third party. But we're talking about like $1 million a year. And so 800 calls, not getting to make those calls, and we're not going to get all 800 because we have 2 paramedics. Like, that would be a fantasy. That's not it. But you're going to get more calls, theoretically. And so if you're looking at it from dollars and cents, you're like, okay, well, maybe that means we'll get more revenue. And that is true. But if you ask Chief Dorn and his team why they want to do it, it's because they don't like being at level 0 860 times a year. They don't like they don't like knowing that they can't come to your house if you need them. So those 2 paramedics will fill that gap, so they are better able to take care of any incident that happens in the city of Havelock. So that's what the 2 paramedics are. The 2 public service worker 1 positions, and they were already included in the budget. The board made some cuts to add the paramedics in. They actually cut some things to put the paramedics in because they thought it was that important. The 2 public service worker ones are included in the budget when it came to us because we are going to, in the next year or 2, take over a whole lot more grass cutting, and we've got to have the people to run the equipment to cut that grass. And so this will put those folks at Patrick's disposal. They will be cutting grass that part of the year, which for us is like 9 months a year. But when they're not cutting grass, they will be augmenting things like ditch clearing or public works projects or things like that. So that's the new personnel pieces. Anything else you want to ask about or talk about? Okay, we'll do some quick business while y'all have one more shot in a second. So, board, you have the opportunity to just go to public hearing if you would like to on June 2nd, in which case you're all welcome to come back out and speak at the mic and put yourself in the record, which you're in the record today too because we did call a meeting. So you could do that. You can also recess if you would like to another workshop if you want one. You already have a workshop scheduled after the public hearing as well. So you could wait till the public hearing and then do all your work at the following workshop, or if you feel like you want another one, we can recess tonight to a workshop next week. Your call. So you guys want to just, so go to the public, so we don't have to do anything if you want to do that. The schedule will stay the same. So we will go to public hearing June 2nd. Let me put that slide back up there in case anybody wants to take a picture of it. Though we can also make these slides available to you if you want to give us your email, because these are all public record. Okay, so in that case, what we're going to do is on June 2nd, which is 2 weeks away, we are going to have our public hearing on the budget. What I would encourage all of you is, if you want to talk to me or anybody on the board or any staff independently in the next couple of weeks because you thought of something you didn't think of today, because it's a lot to digest, we get that, then I'll go to that slide in a second. Feel free to contact us and I'll hit that in a second. Otherwise, come June 2nd, we will do a budget presentation, Kimberly will, and then we will talk about it as a board and we'll take any feedback that you've got. We will keep this workshop on the schedule unless the board gets no input or everybody comes in like, we love it, man, and then the board can cancel that workshop if they don't want to just come stare at each other. I mean, we are pretty, but not unless you want to. You have to schedule that today. That's the one we were talking about. If you want to recess to that, we would recess it to next week. So y'all do want to do one next week. So then I do need a motion, and that'll be at the very end. We'll recess out to that. So y'all prepare on a motion in a second. Okay, so let me show you this, and then we'll do that. So what we're going to do, the board is about to add a workshop, and it's going to be next Wednesday at 7 o'clock right here in this room. And that'll be for them to discuss anything about the budget. You are welcome to come. It's not a open comment back and forth meeting, but you can see how the sausage is made, and we do take breaks, and you can put us in a headlock during the break if you want to talk about something. So we will add an extra workshop meeting. Then we'll go to the June 2nd public hearing. Then we'll have our workshop if we need it. Why would we not have it? If everybody comes in and they're like, hey, man, we're cool, it's all good, then we're not going to have a workshop and just stare at each other. We'll cancel that workshop and then come back to adopt it on June 23rd. It will not be a public hearing on June 23rd, but doesn't mean you can't come up during the 5-minute comment section if by now and then you've come up with some great thing you want to say before the board passes it, because that's at the beginning of the meeting. If in the next 2 weeks, oops, holy mackerel. All right. If you were like, I came up with this great thought, and you just want to talk to one of us, if you go to our website, all of our emails are on that website. And I know a lot of you in this room have our cell phone numbers. But if you don't, you can go on the website and click Mark Larkin or Cynthia. You can click Tyrone. You can click Danny, Brenda, or me, and the email comes directly to us. You also can just send a general one to the city of Havelock, and somebody smarter than all of us will answer it if you would like. We're on Facebook and Instagram. That's probably, I say feel free to contact someone. That's going to be your least effective way because unless you give us contact information, we're not really able to get you exactly what you want. So I say that would be a better way. Also, you know when our budget meetings are, and I just showed you the calendar. All our meetings are open to the public. Public comments are only at those televised meetings. And then we do hold mayor office hours from 3 to 5 on Monday, guaranteed. But I will take an appointment with anybody who would like to any other time. I just guarantee that those 2 hours on Monday, if anybody wants to be there, I will make myself available to answer any question that you have. I do recommend you call ahead. Some Mondays there are none. Some Mondays there are like 12. And you don't want to sit out there for 2 hours waiting. But if you lock one in at 4:15, then that'll be your spot. Also, on board meeting nights, I'm there all the way till 7. And some of you in this room know I've had meetings with you at 6 o'clock before we go into a board meeting to answer whatever question you've got. So we also will do that. You can come in and call City Hall, and they'll set up an appointment with me, and we can pull out that line item budget and have all kinds of fun if you want to. So with that, I will take, unless there's any more questions. Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn tonight until, let me get the date right, May 28th at 7 p.m., and that's going to be here at the Torsen Event Center because Board of Adjustments is going to be meeting over at City Hall. So do I have a motion? All right. Recess. We're going to recess tonight. So I have a motion from Tyrone to recess, second from Danny. All those in favor? All those opposed? All right. So we're done with our meeting tonight, but we will reopen that meeting here next Wednesday if you want to come see how more sausage gets made.